Dr. Justina Reagan is an attorney licensed in Illinois and in Poland, and she's a senior attorney in the offices of Miller Canfield Chicago office. She also works closely with the firm's offices in Poland. She has an impeccable resume. I'd say go take a look at it on LinkedIn because it's going to be too long to read here. And then also with Steve Kim, he's a partner with RKJ Global, and that is a RKF Global, because last year it was RKJ Global.
Yeah, we got a new partner, so I got to stick his name in there somewhere.
Yeah, I bet you keep the business card people really well employed. Just adding, Sharpies. Good, I know what to get you for Christmas. RKF Global is a boutique international law firm who advises companies domestically and internationally on regulatory and government. Steve currently serves in senior leadership position and general counsel for several international companies. Some of the other highlights is was appointed to the Illinois State Senate was confirmed by the Illinois State Senate to serve as a commissioner for the Illinois Human Rights Commission, and also appointed by the justices of the Illinois Supreme Court to serve as a member of the Influential Rules Committee in the Supreme Court. Steve Kim graduated Loyola University of Chicago Law School, so he is another local. And then, Justina, you went to school here. We talked about that when I met with you about a month ago.
So yeah, my resume is pretty long, which is kind of boring and awful. So I went to school in Poland, Italy, and the U.S.
Okay, so can everybody hear her? I want to make sure. Great, so you guys are going to be talking about everything you wanted to know about deal processes and what companies are looking for and what type of things happen to them when they come to the States. And I'm now looking for my notes that, our wonderful panelists gave me my pieces to begin this. And we're just going to go back and forth on some questions. It's a lot less structured than some of the other ones. And so I'll start with Steve just because you're a little bit closer to me on this. And so what role does lawyers play in international cross-border transactions?
Well, I think there are various different roles that we can play, and also kind of depending on the lawyer and depending kind of on the law firm. My firm, we do all the kind of nuts and bolts of the legal work, setting up the corporate structure, making sure that they have the proper documentation to form the company here in the United States, ensure that they've got all their immigration issues taken care of, ensure that they're following all of the regulatory and all the legal processes. So that's kind of the typical lawyer 101 nuts and bolts. But we like to go kind of beyond that because I think international clients, need more than just A to Z legal work, right? And a lot of people go online right now and go to Law Google or whatever and try to get all their services that way and not pay us. But so I think what we try to do is really help them with more than that, because when they come to a foreign country, it's a big decision, not just from themselves, but also for their families. So it's important to highlight where they're moving to, what are the opportunities here, kids' education, real estate, where they should live, and what kind of community might fit some of their personal goals. So we do kind of A to Z when it comes to not just the legal structure, but also assist them with their personal lifestyle too.
Okay, so Justina, what would you add to that?
So first of all, thank you so very much for having me here. I'm really thrilled and honored to be able to speak to this audience, and thank you so very much, Michael, and the whole SelectChicago team. So the reason why I believe, invited to participate in this panel is because of my experience and expertise. Working with international clients is something that I've been doing for years, and especially now, because of the firm I'm working for. So Miller Canfield, in addition to having offices in the US, also has 3 offices in Poland. Poland is our European hub. We have an office in Shanghai, in Canada, and in Mexico. So this is why most of my clients are international companies. And 75% of those, because of my background, because of who I am, are from Europe. And I would say I agree with everything that Steve just said, but I would add one more component, which may apply to my clients only. They first and foremost, they need to understand what incorporating and running business in the US actually means. I feel that they are becoming more and more mindful of all the differences, yet they still need to learn a lot. So this is why I believe that one of the roles of an international lawyer is to explain those differences, and then basically hold your client's hand and advise them on all legal issues, starting from when a foreign company needs to incorporate. Because very often they don't need a US entity to run business in the US. For instance, if they are just exporting from Europe or from anywhere in the world, or if they just want to have distributors or agents in the US. In most cases, they will not need a US entity to do that. So I think that this is what I believe, or at least in my case, or in case of my clients, is probably the biggest challenge that they face. They simply lack knowledge. So this is why they need to work very closely with US lawyers, who will be also able to understand where their clients come from. Because there are huge cultural differences. Not only cultural differences when it comes to the way they communicate, but also when it comes to the way they are doing business. A German company will be inclined to doing business a little bit different from the way a Polish company does it. Not to mention clients from Mexico or China. They are having different business models in mind, which sometimes they want to replicate in the US, which in most cases doesn't really work. So this is when we come in.
Right, and actually one of those interesting things you were just talking about is if a company's coming in and they're just doing exporting, if they needed to become a legal entity or not a legal entity, this is really towards our municipal folks. Most of the municipalities have business license requirements. And then if they're not an entity and if they're doing a DBA, and raise up your hand if I start talking in acronyms people don't know. How does that tend to work? If, say, I'm doing an exporting and I'm a company that doesn't have a legal entity, but I need to get a business license locally.
It will not work. They will need to have some presence, some legal presence in the US. And again, that will be our role to explain it and to guide them.
Yeah. So a question to Steve is, as companies come in and when, walk an example of what it's like for an international company or really a person who's just starting out coming to the States trying to get a checking account. I know we've talked about this a lot, and this is actually teeing up where we're going to go on the next panel, but about setting up a business and a checking account in the United States isn't like what I would do if I was walking down to a Wintrust or a Fifth Third Bank. Explain that.
Well, I mean, if you're going to do business in the United States, right, and you want to have a banking relationship, checking account and everything like that, yes, you do have to be incorporated. You do have to have an operating agreement. You got to be registered with the particular state. These are all documents that banks will want to see before you can open up an account. Most of the time when somebody comes to the United States for the first time, they may be coming in with a visitor's visa, a business visa, right? So they don't have a social security number where they can just simply go in and use that social security number and their home address to open up a bank account. So you're going to have some corporate documents to open up a business account, not a personal account. And most banks now, I think all banks do all of their necessary background checks on kind of know your customer type of activities. But that's a lot of the things that I think a lot of lawyers are starting to do also. As before we kind of take a client internationally, we do check kind of the background on the client just to ensure that we'll be able to assist them here in the United States. But those are things that I think you're going to need some legal advice, the right documentation. And when we talk about documentation, I do warn a lot of kind of foreign companies that documentation is critical. Everybody, we all know that the United States has a judicial system here, and they trust this judicial system to protect businesses, right? If something happens, whether you're from Poland or from China, the courts will protect a business here under the laws of a particular state and the United States. But in order to do that, you got to make sure your documentation is correct, right? So I've had clients that, even large companies that come in originally into the United States, that do kind of I would say, a poor job in forming their company on the way it's structured. I think a lot of people have this misunderstanding that, well, I'm going to come to the United States and I'm just going to form all these LLCs or S-corps and do this and that. Well, if it's not structured correctly, what's going to happen later is that a company's going to sue you, and they're going to try to go after your personal assets because your LLC, they're going to think it's just a fraud, right? And so I think it's very, very important that for foreign companies that when they start in the United States from day one, because it's, the initial cost is minimal. All right, so you want to do all your proper documentation so that later on you don't get into any legal hot water.
Yeah, and Steve, why don't you put it in perspective on the legal costs? We were hearing from Hong Kong earlier today. It's $1 Hong Kong to set up a company in Hong Kong, but in some of the countries that you're working in, what's the typical cost of setting up a corporation?
You mean in the United States?
No, abroad.
Oh.
So some folks don't understand it. Here we're all pretty spoiled.
Right. Oh, yeah. And it's quick, right? We can get it in 24 hours, right? But no, in my firm, we practice primarily in the Middle East. We were one of the first law offices to open up an office in Baghdad, in Iraq. And we do a lot of work in Africa. And I'll tell you, in that region, it is very difficult to open up a business. It can be very, very costly because you need capital requirements, right? So, for example, in Saudi Arabia, you need $500,000, which is about $130,000 to have in your bank account to even start operations, to start a company, right? And it takes quite a bit of time. Now, a lot of countries, though, are starting to restructure their investment platform, and they are starting to allow, I would say, kind of a ease of process. This one-stop shop policy is becoming more and more common in different countries that are trying to attract foreign international investment into their countries. But even with those countries, really, the ease of opening up a business is really nothing like here in the United States.
Okay, and so you just, thinking about the challenges when somebody's coming to the United States and starting to understand the rule of law, because the rule of law based on property and individual rights are totally different than a lot of other places. So getting through that cultural barrier, why don't you use a case story on that?
So when it comes to human rights and constitutional rights, they are actually very much the same. When it comes to the way they are understood and interpreted, then this is when all these differences start. And from my client's perspective, what is really important is to become aware of all those possible liabilities and requirement of having insurance in place, not only for the subsidiary, but also for the parent company. And this is the first thing that I'm always stressing when I'm talking to my clients. So at first, I have to make them realize how litigious people are in the US, because this is not the way it works all over the world. So being aware of that, you really have to have all documents in place, including terms and conditions, even when you are not having any real presence in the US. So in addition, you are rather exporting the goods that are being distributed in the US. You need to have terms and conditions that are governed by US law. And in addition to that, you have to have very good insurance in place. So this is what people start understanding, how risky it may be to do business in the US without having all these instruments in place.
And Steve, we want to continue on that with different types of things on that?
Oh, no, I think, Christina, you said it perfectly. I mean, it's really important. It is a litigious society here in the United States, but, I think of that also, and why it's like this is because, we're a country that comes from different backgrounds and origins, right? And in many countries of kind of more homogeneous societies, there is a kind of a cultural way to maybe fix even business problems, right? And so litigation may not be their first option, but I think due to our diversity, we do have so many different cultures, so it's kind of difficult to resolve a business issue through some type of cultural way of doing things. So, I think we could also look at that a bit positively, thinking that, well, I may be, a foreigner from X country, but I know that, when I come to the U.S. and do business, I will at least have the support of a sound legal foundation that's going to protect my rights in this country also.
Great. And Yusina, why don't you talk about deal timeline? I mean, we're also kind of coming back to that whole deal process. Setting up a company, getting your visas and putting that stuff in place, but really, walking us through from a day somebody calls you to a day they're really in business. Walk us through what that looks like.
So, as you all know, incorporating in the US takes maybe 24 hours. That's cheap, it's very quick, it's very efficient. But then when it comes to timing, what a foreign company needs to be aware of is how much time it takes to open a bank account, how much time it takes to put all requirements, all licenses, in case they are required, in place. And this is what my clients are always advised on. When it comes to transactions, what I've observed is that many European companies are trying to grow their business organically in the US, in the sense of they first are checking out this market by importing their goods into the US. Then their next step is starting cooperating with a distributor or an agent who always needs to be an independent contractor, so they don't fall into this notion of permanent establishment. And then their third step, once they know that this market is really receptive to their products, is to incorporate here. But what I've observed is that this organic growth means that at first they simply want to distribute. They simply want to distribute in the US goods that are still being manufactured in their home jurisdiction. And then once they accumulate some resources, some capital, this is when they are trying or they are planning on taking it one step further, which would be building a facility in the US. And then in addition to conquering the US, also conquering Canada and Mexico. So this is the way most of European companies are growing their business. In addition to that, there are cases of companies who want to acquire US entities. And what I've observed is that depending on where those investors come from, their priorities are different. So for instance, when it comes to Chinese investors, every time we are running a due diligence, we know that in case there is no that much IP involved, it may be the case that that deal will not close. Because having IP in place is always crucial for Chinese investors. It's not that important for European investors, for instance. So this is when you have to be mindful of what priorities your client has. So then you can also advise them, in addition to all those legal terms, also maybe draw their attention to some business terms as well, because this is what most of them also expect from you.
Great. Steve?
And I think there are obviously different countries, as you were saying, different companies in different countries have kind of different goals of why they're coming to the United States. I think there's maybe a lot of companies lately were maybe from Turkey or from China or other places where they are looking at investing in the United States, but also at the same time, as they move their operations to somewhere that they consider to be, might be a little bit more stable, one of the key things that they're going to be looking at is how am I going to do this on an immigration issue? And that is obviously, it's probably one of the biggest challenges, right? Now, I would like to stress, and maybe I know there's a lot of municipalities here too, and you can stress this to investors that stop watching the newspaper, watching the news. Okay, business immigration visa policies haven't changed. Okay, they're not any different from they are now than it was 5 years ago or whatever it is. And so there isn't anything more restrictive or anything like that. There's just obviously more backlogs because there are more and more. There are quite a bit of people that are looking to invest into the United States. But it's very important that those that are looking for a route toward their business to get an immigration visa, they need to really make sure that, again, stressing this documentation, that they do these things right. For all these e-visas, you need a business plan. You can't, you shouldn't be using a business plan that that you used to get a local investor many years ago, right? You got to take this very, very seriously. You have to do a business plan, spend some money on it on a platform that works with what immigration is looking for. So, I hear of these stories of people that do not somehow get their immigration or their visas, and usually there's a reason behind that. It's not just simply, we just decided not to give it to you. There is a sound reason behind that. So it's very, very important that you have this immigration strategy in place.
Great. And then Justina, the idea that yes, the current immigration laws really haven't changed. Thresholds have changed, but with some of the current climates, what are some of the things that you're telling your different applicants about patience and building relationships and knowing that it's a marathon, not a sprint?
So I feel that one of the biggest differences when it comes to doing business in the US is how you do it. Here, everything is based on the relationship, which first you need to establish. So this is why I'm telling my clients that emailing some random US companies doesn't really work here. Everyone is getting hundreds of emails per day. What you really need to do is you have to come here. You have to start attending some events. You have to talk to people. And this is how you have to start building the relationship. And then when it's already in place, you really have to be aware of trust, that I feel that in the US is everything. And unfortunately, I've witnessed some very promising transactions that didn't really work out because this trust was breached. And then there was nothing there. So it really, the US company didn't decide to pull the trigger, and the transaction didn't move forward. So this is what I feel is crucial for foreign investors to understand. As well as the way you communicate. You have to be available. You have to be aware of this 24-hour rule when it comes to business communication. When you are asked a question, you have to answer. It doesn't matter whether you are on vacation. By the way, everyone knows that, people who live in Europe, they have 26 business days of paid vacation, which we are all so jealous of. But regardless of where you are, even if you believe you will not be available, you have to have some people in place who will be responding to your emails. Because again, if you don't, then the trust may be breached, and you may lose all the contacts that you made here. So this is what I feel is really important, and this is what I'm trying to explain to my clients.
Yeah, and Steve, now with you working with different folks coming across, in addition to finding, the cultural aspect and understanding, that, America business does move sometimes faster depending on where you are from the world, but also understanding what that total fit looks like for a person coming to establish themselves in the United States. It's not just the incentives.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's starting to become more and more important. And I mean, this is called Select Chicago. We're talking about the Chicagoland region, right? And like it or not, you know, we're probably not going to have the favorable tax climate compared to some other states throughout the country. But I also think that, you know, when a company is coming to the United States, they're not really coming here to make simple widgets, right? I mean, they're coming here to do something that will require some more technology, some more human capital, some more financial capital, and they have to really look at the entire kind of spectrum here. Working with local municipalities, I think, is key, because I believe, you know, what I've seen lately are that more and more local municipalities are becoming more innovative with some of the local programs to work with these investors, right? So for example, if you're a company, if you need, you know, human capital, there's probably better human capital in this region than you might find, let's say, in, you know, I'm not offending anyone from Alabama, but, you know, maybe somewhere in the South, right? I think, but how do they capitalize in it? And I think that's where the municipalities can play a key role, working with the community colleges, setting up training programs, being able to work with the companies and trying to help some of these needs, I think it's actually very, very critical. And as companies, you know, looking to come to the U.S., sometimes the decisions may not be 100% financial, right? You know, when you are here, you can build a lot of major relationships here in Chicago that you might not have in other areas. You know, we've got an airport that's right in the middle of the country, and you can fly anywhere and everywhere from here. And this is really, really important, because I fly internationally a lot. And I'll tell you, the last thing I want to do after an 18-hour flight landing in Chicago is to get on another flight to go to North Dakota. Right? That's absolutely the last thing I want to do. And so I think having our airports here is critical. We have great schools. We have a very diverse culture. And so there's a lot here that I think is, you know, you have to look at the enhanced kind of human benefit of being in this region. And I think it's important that companies also recognize that attracting talent is not easy also. They have to have better type of programs to attract better kind of human talent, and I think you can find a lot of that here in this area.
Great, and it was exciting hearing from Godfrey earlier today talking about 2 or 3 new programs that Governor Pritzker just rolled out this morning. So we'll be able to read up more on those in the Tribune Evening Edition. So this is great. I want to open it up to some questions. So I want to see, sir, go ahead for questions.
We have companies coming that are small and medium-sized companies that are having trouble with the civil liability, because many European, my companies come from Spain, from Europe.
Okay.
So the insurance over there might exclude the U.S. because of, and when they come here, not just being here as having a subsidiary, etc., but they won't trust you at the beginning, same as with what you said about the bank account. So are there tips or ways to make this easier and faster for companies that are in that process?
May I?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
You need to find a good broker. You need to find seriously, you need to find a broker who is mindful of that and who has worked or has been working with subsidiaries of foreign entities, and who is able to present several options, and then your client should pick one of those. So this is the way we are handling it. We have like a network of brokers whom we recommend to our clients. And I'm absolutely aware of what you are saying. This is unfortunately the way it goes in Europe. Your general liability for the European company, in most cases, will exclude Canada and the US. Because European insurance companies are not even positioned well to assess risk that US market can potentially trigger. So this is why very often our clients are using both European parent companies and US subsidiaries are using the same broker, and then they are getting insurance from here, from a US insurance company.
Great.
Yeah,
Another
there are-
question? Oh, go ahead, Steve, finish.
Yeah, there are European insurance companies that are here in the United States that we have worked with very closely, some German ones that are very good at understanding the difference of liabilities. And you have it in the contract, and it's actually, depending on the project, of course, I think the cost of it is fairly efficient.
Great. Another question? Really? Okay, Leslie.
As communities are out there trying to promote themselves as a great place for a foreign company to invest in, what are some of the more common legal problems that companies might have in setting up shop here? I know you talked about the importance of getting a good start, but what are the common legal things that they get involved in? Are they being sued by other businesses? Are they being sued by individuals? Are there business-to-business issues? If you could just touch on a couple of those, that would be helpful to us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, we obviously have a myriad of legal issues in the United States, especially when it comes to, you have local laws, regulations mostly, you got state law, and then you got the federal law, right? And that's something that most countries, if they don't have that kind of separation like that. And a lot of foreign companies, I think, have a very difficult time understanding that. They feel like, they're like, well, I already paid those taxes. And we're like, well, that's to Washington, D.C., but you got to pay one to Springfield, and then you also got to pay one to, Chicago, to Cook County, right? And so a lot of times I think they look at the law as American law. And when I go overseas, I always tell people, I'm not an American lawyer. I'm an Illinois lawyer, right? And that's something that I think legally that companies really have to understand, and how different those laws are. And that's why I think when a company is setting up their business here in the United States, it's again not just about these incentives. You have to understand the laws of that state. I mean, you want to open up a business in California, weather is nice, that's great, but you want to face the rules and regulations of California also, right? That's going to be very different from, let's say, here in Illinois or a surrounding area, right? So I think these are things that they don't quite understand, and when they get sued for something or they get a fine from a certain government agency, they're saying, wait, I thought I already paid this, what's going on? So I think that's, of course, where lawyers can help in helping them assess all of their potential liabilities.
Okay. Justina, you want to?
I would like to add probably 3 aspects that we haven't mentioned yet. So the first one is to have contracts in place. Very often foreign investors believe that a handshake is enough, which sometimes it may be, but when it comes to long-term business relationships, it's not. So this is the first thing that they have to be mindful of, having a really well-drafted contract in place. The second area where foreign investors tend to struggle is employment law, because here it is different. It's really different. Not only when it comes to the way people are getting employed, but everything that happens later, like all discrimination issues. People from outside of the US are not really aware of that, but they need to be. And the third big one is IP. And I'm not talking about trademark. I'm more talking about patents. I'm more talking about know-how, how it needs to be protected, and what can happen if it is not protected. Mostly there are so many foreign startups that are coming to the US because this is where the money is. So they are coming here to pitch VC, venture capital funds, and angel investors. And very often they come here with having their corporate structure in place because they know that that's a must. And somehow they tend to forget about having their IP protected. And the other day I was working with US investors who found a very promising biotech startup from Czech Republic. So we had that video conference that startup was presenting. It looked so promising. My clients were getting so excited. And then they asked that startup about their IP. Again, I'm talking about a biotech startup. So that gentleman who was the CEO said, you know what, maybe we know that we should get a patent, but it's so expensive. Plus, but you may want to know one thing. We just got back from China. And this is where we were presenting on our biotech investment, biotech projects. So you simply don't do it. You don't, if you have something that is this sensitive to potential patent infringement, that should be your first step. And you should be aware that without that, you will not do any business anywhere in the world. So this is the third one that I would like to mention as the third area of law where foreign investors tend to struggle in the U.S.
Great. Well, I want to thank our panel today. And so I know they're going to be here throughout the balance of the afternoon, I believe. And feel free to talk to them soon.